Hello everybody, welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty. As we move through 2025, I hope to do more informational videos, and this month I want to start off with exploring media mats, from free things that you already have at home to solve this problem, to focusing on things that you can buy, the pros, the cons. I'll share which one is my favorite and why, and after all the list is said and done, I want to hear what I missed and what is your favorite. So let's dive in. I'm going to cover a lot of products in this video, so feel free to use these timestamps to jump to the section that is most interesting to you. However, I'm going to go over a lot of pros and cons and features of these items, so it may be worth watching the whole thing. Every video has to start somewhere, and I'm going to start with the most boring and probably obvious of all of these things, but it helps to illustrate why you might want to invest in a product for this job. So media surfaces or media mats are there to do two jobs when we're working with messy mediums like pastes, paints, watercolor sprays. They protect our surface from getting mucky, they make cleanup a little easier, and they help us get through the project faster depending on the media mat. Now, we can't cover this topic without talking about scratch paper, which I just showed you. I keep a little stash by my desk, but that's not very large. Now, there are mats like this on the market that are much larger. However, if you're like me and you do a lot of scrapbooking, that tends not to cover an entire scrapbook page. And then the other cons that we've got with paper is it's not very durable, and you will end up throwing a lot of it away. Now, that's both a pro because there's no cleaning, and a con because you're creating a lot of trash. If you're using scratch paper, that may not be as much trash because you can recycle it, but if you're using pastes on it, then it becomes not recyclable anymore. All right, I do want to cover that there are other papers in your house, probably in your kitchen, like butcher paper, freezer paper, parchment paper, that you can use for these jobs, and I do use them on occasion. They have pros and cons as well. They're not as durable as other materials, and again, you'll be throwing a lot of stuff away. Parchment paper is really good for pastes, but definitely not good for wet mediums because it just wrinkles up. Butcher paper has a plastic coating on one side, so it does better for all of those things. So it is more of a all-purpose paper that is just less durable than other options. Now, you can make your paper more durable by laminating it, and if you have a laminator at home for other crafty projects, then this is a very inexpensive option for you. The limit here is that most home laminators are 8.5 by 11, and if you're doing scrapbook pages at 12 by 12, the size is not going to be there for you. Now, I do think laminated sheets have a lot of the same qualities as a glass mat does, with the benefit of it being way cheaper, lighter weight, easier to store. If you want to get larger sizes than what you can do at home, you can go to an office supply store and get a larger laminated sheet. I don't know how much those cost because I have never done it, so I would look into that. It could be an option instead of a glass mat. That could be a great low budget option. Now, the thing about laminators, I have one at home and I use laminators for many other things. Here I'm just laminating a basic sheet. If you've never seen how home lamination works, maybe you're new to crafting. This is just a simple machine from Amazon. I think at the time I bought it, it was 25 bucks. It's probably a few dollars more these days. These lamination pouches are often big enough that you can cut your paper in half and spread them apart. And that way, after you laminate it, then you can cut it through that gap there and have sealed edges all the way around and have these different sizes. I use these different sizes for organization. I use them as shims in my die cutting machine. So I think a laminator is a good multi-purpose tool in a craft space, and it provides you with other options that some of these other surfaces do not. Finally, before we move on from the paper category, we need to talk about the splat box, which is on the market, or what I like to call a cardboard box. I would not waste money on buying a product that does this job. This really has a limited use. It's for spatters and sprays. It's too awkward to use for pastes and ink blending and things like that. But if you are using spatters and sprays, this is a very good thing to keep your surface clean because spatters and spray kind of go everywhere. I like one that's kind of a pizza style box, and you could even repurpose a pizza box. You should cover up the bottom so that you don't get food on your projects. but you can do that and reuse a pizza box. The other con to this is that you have to wait for it to dry in between projects unless you use something disposable like paper towels to catch the overspray when you're switching between items that you're spraying. You might also need to reinforce the sides of a box so that it doesn't overspray out the edges. Boxes can be hard to store because they're kind of big and bulky. So this one has a lot of cons to it, but it's free. So it might be an option depending on what types of mediums you plan on using. Now let's turn our attention to things that might be worth buying, and this is a craft mat. It's one of the original mats on the market out there. It was put out by Tim Holtz and Ranger. I suspect it comes from another industry, but I couldn't tell you what off the bat. My least favorite thing about this is that it is brown. There are white ones on the market now, so that might be worth looking into. I like to put my mediums right on my mat, and things like watercolor and inks don't show their true color on brown, so that's why I mentioned the white one. Now, the downside to this one is that it does crack and crease over time unless you store it carefully and treat it carefully, like rolling it up and putting it into something like a mug or a paper towel tube to help kind of keep it protected when you store it. That storage isn't complicated. It's probably reusing items you already have in your house, so it's not a big deal, but it is an extra step if you're not into a lot of cleanup and setup and those kinds of things. All right, the pros to this one is that it is super easy to clean, not only right in place, but you can take it to the sink and totally scrub it down, and it's really easy to do. It reduces product waste because you can scrape up pastes and things and put them right back into the jar. It's super lightweight and fairly easy to store. It's pretty inexpensive, so you could have multiples, or if you're working mostly on small card sizes, you could even cut it apart and have multiples out of one mat. And speaking of cutting it apart, the size is not quite there for scrapbooking. It is intended a lot for card makers. The cracks and creases that I mentioned earlier can gather stains, and so it's not the prettiest option. Since I'm doing YouTube videos a lot, I do have to think about that. And I think the biggest con to this one is also its biggest pro, which is that non-stick surface, which is great for cleanup and all the mediums you could think of you can throw at it. However, if you're trying to hold down a project, it gets complicated. I have discovered over the years that this will resist some forms of tape. Now this tape is working okay, but sometimes I've tried taping down projects and it just hasn't stuck to my surface. I've tried taping my surface down to the table and that doesn't stick and everything shifts and moves on me. All right, I think we've covered those enough. Moving on to the silicone, aka grip mats on the market. I believe these are fairly popular right now, but I think they are overrated, and I'll tell you why as we go. This one is from scrapbook.com, which I got for free in an order. It is fairly thin, and as you can see here, it does work well with thin sheets of paste that you can often just peel off the mat. But also, as you can see, it tends to stain with various inks, especially alcohol inks. Underneath that mat, I have a silicone mat from my kitchen used for baking, and they work a lot in the same way. Now, the biggest pro to this one is kind of its sticky quality, and again, it's also its biggest con, because if you are trying to clean up small bits of things like that, the residue keeps wanting to stick to the mat. So I find a rinse off in the sink is required for a lot of cleaning of these. What's nice is that they're very flexible, durable. You can throw them in a drawer and you're not going to damage them. The thicker one underneath, of course, isn't quite as flexible, so it's a little bit harder to do that with, but really you can kind of abuse these and it's really not a big deal. You can also get these from the kitchen department at stores, so they're readily available. You don't have to buy specialty ones on the market. Those sizes are great for doing scrapbook layouts, plus you can just cut them apart for other sizes if you need. My favorite use for these is as kind of ink stands, and that's why I like to cut them apart. These are touted as being grippy so that your projects won't shift and move on you. I don't find that to be the case enough. Yes, they are a little bit grippy, but not enough to keep projects in place. Here you can see when I move the ink over, it will slip and slide, but with the grip mat underneath it, it will do fine. But as you see me working on projects, there, my little hat just kind of moved around on me and started slipping and sliding. Despite me trying to press it down, it is still sliding around on me. And then sometimes if you're doing like vigorous ink blending or large scale ink blending, the whole mat will move despite it's supposed to be grippy to the table as well. Now this is my biggest pet peeve ever. See all of that? That is lint and dust that it is just picked up from life. You have to constantly clean these things to get that stuff off of there because that hugely reduces its grip quality. As you can see here, it's not too hard. You do have to use a lint-free cloth in order to wipe this down or take it to the sink and blast it with water. So when you're using these, it's going to need cleaned on a regular basis. And when you're storing them, you really have to protect it from dust and dirt and lint. And using a Ziploc bag can help do that. So that's an extra step towards storage. It's a lot of extra steps toward cleaning. So that and its lack of true grip quality are why I think these are overrated. Moving on to another hot product is these photopolymer grip mats. Waffle Flower has some. There's other companies out there on the market. And in fact, I'll show you one fun new idea using these, which is totally logical when you think about where these came from. And that is clear photopolymer stamps. And this is like the backside of a large stamp, only it isn't a stamp. It's just the photopolymer. Now you can see it's hard to see on my table, so I put a piece of white paper underneath it so that you can see. These are super grippy. Both they will grip to your table, they will hold your projects in place. They are really, really grippy. And that is the highest quality of these. Now, as you can see, they will stain. You can't use alcohol mediums on them because that will damage the photopolymer as far as I understand. You can't cut into them like you can on some other surfaces, and we'll talk about that a little bit in some of the next products that we go over. Okay, you just saw my project slip on me, and that is uncommon with these if they are clean. And that is another con to these, much like the silicone, is that they pick up lint and dust super easily, so you have to clean these on a regular basis, and you need to use that lint-free cloth. Here I'm using a Chamois product, which is my favorite lint-free item for cleaning, and that does mean when you store them, you have to protect them from dust and dirt in the air. They come with these acetate covers, both top and bottom. You need to put those back on, and as you see me taking the bottom one off, they can be very hard to get off because these things are sticky. And I would even put it in a Ziploc bag on top of that. The next con of these is they are pretty expensive kind of per square inch when you think about it. Most of these don't go too much bigger than card size, so you're not going to find sizes for scrapbooking. However, the industry is responding in some interesting ways. Because these originated with stamping, they're turning them back into stamps. So Gina K has this product out on the market, which is stamp backgrounds on one side, and you get the benefit of the grip mat on the other side. So this could be a great way to go if you want to get a grip mat. And you might want to get a grip mat if you're largely just doing ink blending. I think this could be the tool for you. Next up, let's talk about sticky mats. Now these tend to be stickier and cheaper than the photopolymer mats, probably along the same price line, maybe cheaper than the silicone mats. However, the stickiness of these does wear out over time, so these are not as long lasting. There are ways to add adhesives to re-stick them. Here I'm showing you that these ideas came from the electronic die cutting industry, where they use these sticky mats through the electronic machines. And if you use one of those for a scrapbook size, you might get a size big enough for your projects, depending on what mediums you're using. Sprays, not so much. You could also cut those down. Like if you have old ones that aren't sticky enough for your machines again, you could cut them down and repurpose them and not buy anything additional. I do like these the most for holding down my projects because they are the most reliably sticky when they're new. So you can clean them off with a lint-free cloth to kind of reboost that stickiness, and that works for a while. And like I said, they do run out of sticky eventually. You don't want to scrape anything off of these because that scrapes away some of the stickiness. So you can get little bits of paper stuck on these, and that can be hard to remove to get the mat back to a clean state. Here again is my lint-free cloth, which is that chamois to clean it off, but you'll notice they're still going to stain anyway. Now, I do like that you can find clear varieties. I use these for positioning things like alphabets and embellishments on my projects, not the sticky kind of alphabets or embellishments because those will ruin your mat. Speaking of, I tried to re-stickify my mat using a double-sided adhesive, and that was unsuccessful. However, there are spray repositionable adhesives on the market that you can use to add to these to help re-stickify them. I would cover up the empty edges so that you don't overspray on those. And one final word on that sticky is that you do need to keep these covered, much like the previous mats. However, I find the acetate protective sheet that they come with is enough to do that job. The very final word on sticky mats is that their best use case is for ink blending. These are kind of a no-no for pastes because that paste will just cover up the sticky and make your mat unusable. Likewise, alcohol products are a no-no on this because alcohol breaks down adhesives. So if you're an ink blender, then this is an affordable option. We are almost to the end of this list. This is the second to last, which is the self-healing mat. This is the mat that I am currently using on a regular basis. Fun fact is that these actually come from the sewing industry where they use rotary cutting blades, and these are self-healing because they resist those cut lines from the sewing cutting tools. This does not mean they are gouge proof, but as you'll see in a little bit, you can cut on them. Now, these come from different companies in different colors, often black and white. This one has gray on the back, plus they have grids on them. They are often large enough that they can handle even double-page layouts, so that is all in the pro category. And if you've ever bought a magic mat from scrapbook.com, that is the same material, and that is why it's great for die cutting, because of that self-healing property that these mats tend to have. I find that just about all mediums work well on this mat. I have noticed alcohol mediums do cause a haziness, but it hasn't ruined the mat, so I'm okay with that. And here you can see I am doing some cutting on here, so this mat stays on my desk full time, and it does most of the jobs I need it to do. If I want to tack down a project for, say, ink blending, I just use some tape or even pull out one of the other media surfaces. I have just discovered that these come in a clear version, which intrigues me because I would love to put this on top of a wood desk surface so I have the aesthetics of wood and all the protective qualities of the media mat. And yet I ask myself, will these stain? At any rate, that covers the self-healing media mats, so let's move on to my favorite and the final choice. Here we have arrived at glass mats. Glass mats tend to be the heaviest, but they are also the most durable and the best across almost all mediums. I store mine back there behind me because the biggest con for me is that they create glare when I'm filming, and as a YouTuber, that is highly distracting and it is one of my pet peeves. However, this is my most favorite surface, and someday if I can get my lighting set up in a way that doesn't glare, then I will likely return to this surface. Now, these ones won't hold down your projects like some of those other sticky mats do, so they are not perfect. However, I think they are the most flexible for everything and an all-around choice. If you need to tape down your projects, you can, or you can just use an extra sticky mat as part of your creative process. These are also very heat resistant, especially because they often have little bumper feet on the back, and that keeps them off your table and prevents heat from getting through. The self-healing mats are also heat resistant, so that is another good choice for that. Glass mats often have a surface on the side that is great for a palette, so you wouldn't necessarily need a separate palette. They come in a range of sizes, but you're gonna pay the price. Larger mats can cost quite a bit of money. However, there are larger mats with magnets in them too, so that can solve one of the problems of holding down your projects. So this is my favorite. I think it's the most durable, the most long-lasting, the easiest to clean. You can just scrape away dried on product. The one thing I've noticed that it does get odd with is these gummy adhesives. So tape runners and glue dots, you will need alcohol to clean those off. Plus glass mats you can also cut on, at least most glass mats. If their grid printing is on the top, maybe not. So this really is my favorite surface. Okay, before I totally wrap up, I want to let you know that I am in the process of creating this cheat sheet chart which you will be able to download on my blog over at craftysoup.com/freebies if you want to put this information all in one compact resource. All right, out of all of these mats, what is your favorite and why? What do you think I missed? What did I overlook? What do you think I was too opinionated on? Let me know in the comments down below so that we can help everybody save their crafty dollars and get the product that will work best for their needs.